That's the one. Cool. So yeah, welcome everybody. This is MLTV show where we talk about OCaml, Reason, and ReScript programming languages. I'm David. I'm gonna be your host, and today we're gonna have like an amazing interviewee. So yeah, I'm just spending the like 1 hour meeting the people behind the communities and the tools. I think it has been very fun, and we're improving day to day. So yeah, please subscribe and follow us. We would love to have you in our journey. And if you're familiar with OCaml, that would be a perfect match for you. So with further delay, let's get our host into the show. Hello, Antonio.
Hey, good morning.
How are you?
Pretty good.
Cool, cool. So yeah, we're gonna talk today with Antonio. So first is who are you?
Yeah, my name's Antonio. I'm right now just sort of a working on OCaml community stuff, mostly on Melange and Dune. That has been recently what I've been working on, but mostly I've helping a few companies here and there, such as Ahrefs, right? Migrate to Melange and develop the product.
Yep, that's a good introduction about yourself. So yeah, I work for HRF. So just to for have some context, and Antonio has been helping us, me and obviously Javi, one colleague, that we are migrating to all the front end into Melange. So we're gonna talk about Melange today, and probably some OCaml because yeah, why not? They are completely related. So, but before talking about Melange, what's your background? Where do you come from? How do you know how computers works and all of this?
Yeah, okay. So I grew up in Portugal. In and then I studied computer science, sort of a traditional sort of path, in I guess in university, and I think I learned OCaml early on, maybe like second year, maybe like third semester or fourth semester. I can't really remember, but the
Right.
class wasn't taught very well actually, and or people the language was unfamiliar. People didn't like it very much. I think it wasn't until like 2016 when Jordan Walk sort of put out Reason ML, and that I gave it a serious look again, and then like that by then I was pretty hooked. Like I saw Reason ML, and I I started being really interested in discovering how pragmatic a language like OCaml could be, and sort of digging into it, and it's just the rest has been history, I guess. I've just been very very interested
Right.
in the ecosystem and the tooling ever since.
Right. Yeah, because like through the years, I think you have been working like a lot in the parser, but as well like all the tooling around OCaml. So
Yeah, that's yeah. I think initially I did a lot of recent ML contributions. I That's how I started poking around how does it work, and what can I do to improve it. I think I was toying with buckle script at the time, I believe, and but though my focus was always sort of how do we move this community in a way that compiles to both native and JavaScript.
right.
That was always like a big one for me, since I was coming from like the Clojure community, where like mixing Clojure and Clojure script is in for the same system, right? For the same application is very common. People
Right.
do that. You can sort of, they call it reader conditionals, but basically you can conditionalize code in or out based on whether it's on the client or like not the client necessarily, but like whether it's compiling for JavaScript or compiling for the
Right.
JVM.
Right.
So I sort of
That's
wanted to do the
that sounds
same.
cool.
Is like, all right, I mean, if it's the same language on the front end and back end, I kind of want to do it as well. I kind of want to explore it and see. Yeah, I think I initially even gave a talk like in at a small like FP conference in Finland about exploring like
Okay.
how to tie Reason ML together with like an OCaml server, right? And how to best put it together. That was when I think I was doing my initial explorations of it.
Right.
But at this point, I just rambled so much that I lost your initial question.
That's fine. That's fine. So your interest comes more from the compiler side rather than type theory, kind of academic, or well, because aside from like OCaml being very robust, what are your passions?
Yeah. Um, I think to answer your question, yeah, I'm definitely have a bias towards the more like practical, pragmatic side of things rather than the theory aspects. Though I've had to learn a lot of the theory to do the work that I do today.
Right.
Um, I mean, I'm mostly interested in building like networking tools and like networking infrastructure. Uh, on that, I guess on that perspective, that's what my where my interests lie.
Right. Right, that makes sense. And you mentioned that the closure script community are
Yeah.
very kind of used to share code and do conditional compilation. Uh, what are the detractors? Like, what are the first of all, what are the good sides of it, which I think are kind of obvious. But what are your views on the good parts of cross compiling?
Oh, so in Clojure in particular, or sharing code,
Yeah,
or
well, sharing code in general.
okay. Yeah, I think the reason why I like sharing code is because you can generally have your so like you're not going to share like router code, or you're not going to share web server code or something like that. That doesn't make sense generally.
Mhm.
So generally, what I do is I write a set of types that are shared between the backend and the front end. Let's say a traditional client server application, and if you have OCaml that can compile to JavaScript, for example, with Melange, which I know we're going to talk about in just a little bit, right?
Right.
You can use those types, and you can use those like helper functions that work on those types. Let's call them business logic, right? And you can use the same code, and you can compile it to both JavaScript. You can compile it to the backend as well, and that actually turns out to be very helpful when if you have a layer that knows how to translate what goes at the network boundary, right? How does the communication serialize and deserialize into those types that your application knows? And just having that and using something like I know Ahrefs uses ATD like pretty heavily.
Mhm.
Other people really like using GraphQL for that, myself included. So as soon as you solve I guess the network boundary, you solve the layer where things get serialized and deserialized, then you can sort of always be in your like little happy land of strong typing, and that's
Right.
generally what I use it for and what I like it.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. And what are the contrasts? Like there are a few detractors of cross compiling. What are the main reasons to not do that?
Oh, like compiling to multiple
Yeah.
platforms. The reasons not to do it. It's a
If it's
tough
a long
one, right?
silence,
I
it's a
mean,
tough one,
sorry, yeah.
right?
I mean, I've just been so
Just
I think
like just an
entrenched
example.
in
That's a good because there's a lot of like problems. For example, like how primitive code in JavaScript. For example, if you want to encode a date, if you want to go like JSON is not
Oh, I see what you're
perfect
saying. So,
implementation.
like,
For example,
I mean, that's those are great points, and like you certainly have a lot more experience with this clearly because you have
right,
been working on, I guess, making a standard library that was compiled to JavaScript also compiled to native.
right,
Um, so I didn't realize you were talking specifically like about the technical pain points of making it work. I think there's always some kind of and that's a really good point, right? There's always like a really big infrastructure cost, like
right,
infrastructure or like upfront cost to doing that because you're either relying on something having done it for you, and that for example, like since I brought it up before, that was the case in Clojure or Clojure script, right? The
hmm,
team that maintains the Clojure script compiler makes sure that the standard library, for example, compiles really like cleanly to JavaScript and like preserves the same semantics.
right,
So that's definitely a big challenge technically to I guess compile to two platforms at the same time. I think it's not so different than general conditional compilation, in the sense that like we've been writing C, like cross-platform C, for 40, 50 years, right?
Right.
I don't think the story is very different. And what I mean by
Right.
that is that, like, one, yes, it sucks to do it, but we know how to do it, right? We add reader or preprocessor macros or conditionals to, or ppx to. We have to add different implementations sometimes. So the good thing is it's sort of figured out that way, and it's doable. The hard part is like maintainability, and like actually like then maintaining two different implementations of something,
Right.
and
Right.
making sure that the semantics actually work really well. The runtime representations might be different.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I'm sure you know all about this.
Yeah, I mean, like complexity is definitely like the pain point, right? Like it definitely grows. Yeah, your system needs to obviously understand the other, and that's kind of like
Exactly.
the like yeah, that's explodes on complexity.
That's a good point. But like,
So
but for me, like, and let me just say that like the trade-off is worth it.
right,
Right, because yes, it's really painful. Some it's really painful if, like, you or myself or you're Dave, who are actually working on these parts of the ecosystem, but the goal eventually is to provide a nice wrapped black box
right, yeah,
that right, that just transparently and magically
yeah,
does things for you. And right, and what I mean by that is, like, we're working on a nicer experience, to not have you have to fight all the different intricacies that are involved in compiling to
right.
different platforms.
Right. So let's get into the topic now. Reason was born with a few different kind of like goals in mind. The Jordan side of things and the Bagelscript side of things kind of like merged together.
Hmm.
Reason was or is a language of OCaml that remains 100% compatible with OCaml and their tooling and everything. Dune, the LSP, and everything. It just changes the syntax in order to see people to like C style language to be
That's right.
more like friendly, and then BuckScript, which tries to be more compatible with JavaScript ecosystem and time integration. Even though they obviously have a past to be together. Um, yeah. So what have you done after BuckScript kind of like went all in the direction of not caring about the reason vision and
Yeah.
continue going into the JavaScript ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, we've been busy. Excuse me. We've been
Right.
busy. So yeah, I think you're like what you're referring to. Like, I guess it was, I think, summer 2020, I'd say, is when sort of um, the BuckleScript team decided that we're not, right, they're not going to pursue a direction that is compatible with OCaml anymore. We're going to sort of, like, I guess when I say we, I mean sort of like quoting them. Um, um, yeah, I guess BuckleScript decided they were going to evolve as a separate language, and they have added really, really, really interesting features as part of that split. So, I guess first of all, I think it has sort of worked really well. I think it has worked really well for them. Um, I don't know if you've been keeping up or if the audience has been keeping up, but like making records transparently compiled to JavaScript, adding like optionality to those keys so that if you omit some keys, they don't get compiled into like key undefined, or like the key I think is even not present in the JavaScript output. They have added async await to make it very, very familiar to JavaScript folk. I think they're working on making language uncurried by default, which is a really, really interesting accomplishment. I'm looking forward to seeing how that works. So like definitely like check out Rescript if you're interested in a language that has a really, really strong type system, just like OCaml's, and compile. It is very, very like in tune and attuned for the JavaScript platform itself. However, and I guess this is where like my work in Melange comes in. Is this is like it's right, like everything that I just said is incredible, right? It's a really interesting feat, and I think it's a really interesting ecosystem, really interesting compiler. However, it's not what I was interested in personally, and it's not what I wanted to use to build my apps. And like all the apps that I had before that I wanted to keep working sort of in that stack. Um, so because I like the OCaml community so much, and I like working within OCaml so much, I decided to sort of explore. And I think this was like summer of 2020 as well. Like I immediately started exploring like what would a compile like the sort of take the same core technology that this is like the old buckle script compiler that was a really interesting piece of technology. What could happen if we take that and we still preserve the properties of compiling to JavaScript from OCaml, right? Not removing all the code and like the features that bucklescript rescript now had removed in order to move ahead. We started exploring actually like what would happen if we just kept compatibility as much as possible. We upgraded syntax like the compiler version. We moved it to not needing an OCaml like a fork of the OCaml compiler. If we could install it as a library, sort of as a library, at least the type checker modifications that a compiler like that needs. What would happen if we just increasingly moved closer to OCaml and just really started claiming that actually this is not a buckle script, this is not a rescript, this is not a reasonml script, this is not anything else. This is actually just OCaml, and we support all these like surface syntaxes again for compatibility because we need to. But like, what would happen if we could just provide an alternative OCaml compiler to JavaScript? And that seemed to have really like made an impact. Like looking back, I think like people were interested in the sort of the approximation to the community, which had not been like such a priority in the past. And so I guess I'll pause here for a little bit because this is the motivation for how we got from the buckle script / reasonml split into reasonml and rescript to right now we have an alternative exploration, a project that I started sort of tinkering with, and then announced, hey, I upgraded the Melange compiler. I upgraded this buckle script compiler. I forked it, upgraded to 4.12. I added a minimal integration with Dune that is really bad. It's just goes scans a project and generates a text-based Dune file. Like, are people interested in it? Do people like it? I was building an app myself at the time, and this is all I was using. So I just wanted to keep using it, so I built it for being able to keep working within like buckle script in this application.
Right. That sounds like an amazing explanation of what Melange is. So
I will. I can. I think I can. I can talk about from like what got us from there to today in just a little bit. Like I'd love to pause here and like answer any questions.
Yeah, that's perfect. So recently, we're gonna talk about this in a minute, but the first pain point that, because as soon as Hrefs know that you were working on that, we definitely needed that. So Href has like all the backend is in OCaml. We have like tiny bit of C, but all of the backend is in OCaml, and all the front end is in Reason. Tiny bit of JavaScript, of course.
Right, Hrefs was like a very early adopter of ReasonML, and like they built a bunch of applications. We're using ReasonML and Reason React, and they were all in on buckle.
Yeah, we're all in on buckle script, and then when the split happened, we were sad, we didn't know what to do, etc. And we have like blog posts for all of this. But as soon as Melange got published, we tried out, and the Dune integration was just like super crappy at the time, because we're generating a big Dune file, and our performance is kind of like a top priority, because we work all the front end, all the people, all the backend as well. We work in a monorepo, so like performance is kind of like a very very important feature for us. So we just like knock your door basically and say, hey, Antonio, can you do a better Dune integration, please? And 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 yeah, and that's like just explain from your point of view what has been the experience, what Happy did, what you did,
Yeah,
how Dune work, and all of this.
yeah, that's really good context. So I guess I perfectly, I think in the timeline that I was putting together, I think I stopped maybe around March 2021, right? This is when I wrote a blog post um, about like the state of compiling to JavaScript in OCaml, like what I was proposing to do next. That was like sort of the Melange announcement of sorts. And as they've mentioned, like Ahrefs was fairly interested in moving, sort of trying out this compiler that preserved compatibility rather than moving in a direction that wasn't compatible with all like this legacy code that they had work for, like, you know, that was generating revenue for their business. And so they're heavy, as they've mentioned as well, like Ahrefs are heavy users of OCaml. They're also heavy users of Dune. That's what they um, that's what they use to write and build their code. So the goal at the time was, all right, well, what if we could explore a really like deep integration between Melange and Dune? How could we compile, or rather, like, how could we configure the Melange compiler using Dune files in the way that we're used to doing, and have that emit JavaScript in a way that is compatible with, I guess, all the really all the tooling in the OCaml ecosystem. Let's call it the OCaml platform, right? That's the name
Yeah.
that the OCaml community and the OCaml folk use for it. So yeah, so I'd say, you know, we're all busy. You know, life gets in the way. So I think we only started working on this project. We only really aligned on it, I think, September 2022 was when we like really decided, or not necessarily myself, but like I was, you know, grateful to be a part of it, that Ahrefs decided that, hey, we're actually going to be going all in on Melange. There is actually no other option, so we'll have to make it work. Uh, and so that was very exciting. I think seeing that kind of interest in a project that I started, was dedicated a lot of energy into, was sort of like interesting validation. I guess at the same time, the OCaml Software Foundation had also reached out and saying, hey, right, that they were interested in the project and they wanted to support it financially to see whether it could speed, like accelerate its development a little bit. So two things that I'm, you know, very, very grateful for. And so I guess since October 2022, we've just been really, really hard at work integrating Dune and Melange. That's sort of the primary project that we have been working on. And you know, we're pleased to say, like, and if you're not aware, that like now Dune has, like, especially in the next release 3.8 that's going to be released fairly soon, probably as soon as next week. There will be Melange support in Dune, and what that means is, if you're familiar with OCaml and how Dune works, today you define what they're called stanzas, basically like expressions within parentheses, just sort of like S expressions, like in Lisp. You define those expressions to configure how Dune will build your code. Some of those constructs are libraries or executables, so it's like well-defined abstractions abstractions with well-defined boundaries for the code, the code in your repositories. And so what we made possible is we added a new mode to Dune. It's called mode Melange. And so when you're writing and configuring a library in Dune, you can also go there and write, hey, this library can also compile with Melange. And the only difference for, let's say, for a library is really just adding a new field, modes Melange, right, in the best case, assuming nothing else needs to be ported or anything like that. So that is fairly exciting, and that also means that we get access to a lot of things by default,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
by
Yeah. I'm
allowing
gonna stop
Melange.
you for a second.
Oh yeah,
So
well,
sorry.
yeah.
One
Please,
more.
please, please. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
it's probably a good
Just,
time to stop and ask a question.
yeah, just to continue, I think like Dune, when Dune integration is polished, you break a lot of silos, or a lot of problems that you run when you have like a big code base with Rescript. I think no, I don't want to compare them to bash them or anything, but there are features that, for example, libraries like you need to have like a global namespace. Sometimes it's very good idea to have a global namespace, but when you have like a I don't know. I think we have like 2 million lines of code in Reason. When you need to maintain like a flat namespace because of Rescript,
Yep.
it's nightmare. It's nightmare, right?
And I
You
think what you were
start
alluding to was, I guess, like the state of monorepo support, right? There
right.
are a
Yeah,
few things that we get for free by using Dune,
yeah,
and like great monorepo and great vendoring support and great namespacing support for OCaml modules, which I think is also something you were referring to,
yeah,
just is really really good. And it's not only like, I mean, it's good because it's like the culmination of like years of experimentation and build systems for OCaml. So for once, or not, sorry, not for once, for one, we get to learn and use all like that knowledge. We're literally standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Like we're um really get to use all that great knowledge that has accumulated in the ecosystem through tooling over the years, and we get to put it to use for our specific use case, right? Because we made it such that Melange has the same compilation model as OCaml, right? Um, you have parsing, you have pre-processing. Sorry, you have parsing, you have pre-processing of the AST, you have OCaml dep running, and then you have, I guess, compilation to say like a binary artifact, and then from then you can generate JavaScript code. That sort of works very well with like how the OCaml works very well with the OCaml compiler compilation model as well. So we just get a lot for free by
right.
adhering to that, right? We integrate with Dune, and so now we have the same language for defining um, well contained pieces of code, such as libraries and executables. We get Merlin or OCaml
LSP,
LSP
yeah,
editor integration for free, because Dune, if Dune understands our project, then it can generate the LSP integration. We get formatting like support, because Dune has hooks for refumpt and for OCaml format. Uh, I guess tooling. We we get like ODoc, so we can generate beautiful like API documentation pages for our libraries just by writing with Dune. We get, like in the case of applications that applications that work on I guess both the server and the client, such as hrefs, you get a build from a single Dune command, right? You can just get
yeah,
Dune build, and it builds your entire mono repo. I think that's pretty amazing. Like, and then like you get all the uh, big thing that I'm glossing over, right? You actually get access to a native tool chain and the source-based package manager. What that means is now you don't have to be pre-packaging your PPX. You don't have to
oh,
consume your libraries from npm from source and build them on every project. So you actually can depend on these PPXs that may or may not be pre-installed in your OPAM switch. You are able to be right, because of the Dune integration. We're now able to generate an install file and publish, say using Dune release or OPAM publish. We're able to publish these Melange libraries to the OPAM package manager, have them installed in your switch just once, right? Just once, and then you say use the same library in 2, 3, 4 different projects without ever having to recompile the binary artifacts for that library, right? Because it's not really like a bastardized vendoring. It's proper installation in an OPAM switch.
right. Yeah, yeah. That's. I think the benefits from integrating with the OCaml platform are huge. I think we can.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so like they are huge. As soon as you understand how OCaml works, you might feel like you are, or if you play around with JS of OCaml, you add modes JS and you have like the entire thing compiled. I think with Melange, we want to get to that. And there's a few questions about features that we have, features we don't have. For example, like from the bottom up, someone is asking for from the gen type. So do we have like
Oh,
a
yeah.
generation
Yes.
for TypeScript or DT files?
Mhm. I think. Oh wow! Excuse me. I think. I think there's nothing preventing gen type from working, other than I guess gen type works with OCaml 406, or at least the compiler libs for OCaml 406. I must have a fork somewhere of gen
Right.
type. I remember porting it to 414. I think technically there's nothing preventing gen type from working, other than like it needs. I think it needs to be invoked, like to be usable, to be like to for people. It would have to be integrated with Dune probably, or we would have to provide some kind of hook, some kind of flag for like, hey, whenever you. I think if I'm not mistaken, I think gen
I
type
think it's a
works on.
PPX, right?
No, I think it works on the CMT files.
Right.
So it perhaps it is a staged PPX, or could be made to work as a staged PPX.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes
But I think
sense.
it just needs a hook to be, because I think it needs to be called on every file, right? So you could use it today just very manually with a script. You'd have to figure out where Dune puts the CMT files. You'd have to go there and generate the files for you. So technically, there's nothing preventing it from working. I think if there's enough need and people need to, like, if people are using it or were using it, and this is, I guess let's put it this way: like, if this is the blocker that is getting, like, if this is something that, like, once implemented gets some companies, someone who's like some project that's using Melange um, in production, uh, if this is like the last remaining feature to get them to switch, then we could prioritize it basically.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So now talking about like features that have rescript that might not work in Melange. What like let's break
Oh,
on
that's
this
yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one.
this watermelon. Let's get into the juice again. So what are the features that Melange would not support from rescript, and which
Yeah.
ones? Yeah.
I think off the top of my head, right, initially, so there are some features that we cannot support because of like the vision of being compatible with OCaml, and then there's some features that we just will not support because I guess the trade-offs like don't make sense as I myself have analyzed them, and I guess we can discuss any and all like decisions always, and if there are better arguments, I'll hear them and hopefully make a different decision. But in terms of features that Rescript can support that Melange doesn't, I think I would start with async await. That's one initially that Rescript has released, that Melange does not support and will not support, because async await. So I believe that in Rescript, async await has some type checker changes, and
And a new
with
primitive.
a new primitive as well. There you
Yep.
go. And so, and if there's a new primitive in the Lambda, and type checker changes, those are the sort of things that we're actually not looking to change as much as possible. Especially because like I have a dream that someday like we'll get close enough to like the OCaml that some of our like type checker changes will be good enough to be integrated in the OCaml compiler. And so because of that vision and because of that dream, I'm trying to be like very, very conservative when it comes to changing sort of like those base, like adding new things to the Lambda representation, or changing a field in the type tree, or making a type checker modification. I was just
Right.
trying to just be not make those try not to make those changes as much as possible, right?
Right.
So async await is one of those. I know Eduardo is mentioning in chat that like eventually when we support OCaml 5 and if we're able to support algebraic effects, then we could easily do async await on top of that. I guess that is possible because I guess promises are just continuations and algebraic effects as well. But in the meantime, while we don't have algebraic effects, you can use the let bindings or the binding operators,
Yeah.
right? So we've had this actually since OCaml 408, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been a few years now, maybe three years. And you can use the let binding operators to express any monadic computation or applicative computation. And so in my mind, that is in fact a superset of async await, which makes it allows you to express a lot more, the composition of a lot more computations than just asynchronous computations in JavaScript. So in all my projects, the first thing that I define now when I start a new Melange project is I define my own set of binding operators that either use js.promise or they use reason promise, and I use those throughout my code for async code. It's a really interesting experience.
Right. So yeah, I think one of the things that most people might not know that is that we support rescript syntax. So like one of the brain fucks I think is if you depend on a library that is written in rescript and does not have those features. So I believe it's rescript 10 or 10.1. I think we can compile those. So you could even have both like the three syntaxes all together.
That's right. That's also a good point. I guess I only described async await. So let me describe a few more, and then we can also get to the compatibility aspect.
Right.
So something else that we're not going to support is uncurried by default, and so that's just like that would just not be OCaml, and I guess so that's out of the question, right? Because Melange compiles OCaml to JavaScript. The other thing that we can't support that I mentioned as well earlier is optional keys in records, and
extensible. Yeah.
I think the new JSX version 4, which relies heavily, I believe, on some keys in records being optional.
Yep.
So we I guess to reiterate the point, like we try to preserve OCaml compatibility to the max, and so we try to stay very much within the OCaml language and just the OCaml language. There have been a few extensions over time, and like some extensions to the language are needed that we either implement through like PPX extension points or like some special attributes. But those should only be necessary when you really need to to produce some special like JavaScript runtime representation that is a bit different than the representation that Melange outputs by default to the JavaScript platform. So really only at the boundary like of the foreign function interface, right? Like I'm calling foreign JavaScript code. This is when we need to extend the language a little bit. But we try to be minimal and very explicit about it.
Right. So what's the status of Melange?
The status of Melange. Melange has been integrated with Dune. However, the Dune version that has full support for for Melange has not been released yet. So we're sort of like stuck on a limbo, waiting for Dune to be released so that we can then release Melange V1, and that really is the goal. I think as soon as Dune gets released next week or the following, we're just going to cut a Melange version 1 release, because this is sort of the milestone that we set ourselves to achieve. Back in September, October, when we started working, right, Javi, myself, and Rudy from the Dune team, we decided that Melange would be ready, or both Melange and the Melange integration in Dune would be ready for public consumption when Ahrefs was like, using it in production. I think that's right. If if Melange and the Dune integration can build the gigantic hrefs code base, which for people out there takes, what is it, like 1 minute and a half on a 256 core machine, right? It's
Yeah.
it's 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 quite a sizable code base. And so we right, if Melange has all the features, can build this code base, if Melange has all the features to support all the like the side use cases, right? Like, how do you model assets? How do you depend on runtime JavaScript? How do you depend on CSS that you might want to import? How do you pass this to a bundler? How do you so I guess we're now at that point, right? We if people might, as you are definitely aware, and people in chat may also be aware, I think 2 weeks ago or so, Javi wrote a really interesting blog post saying, just saying how Ahrefs is using Melange, and that all production coded Ahrefs is being compiled with Melange right now. So, I mean, to answer your question just very directly and very succinctly, I think we're ready, right? I think the status of Melange is
Okay.
we need to cut a V1.
Solid answer. I think that's a solid answer. So yeah, like B1 is ready. Documentation is on the works.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like a question that I wanted to maybe stop a little bit and ask. When the split happened back in the day, one of the big projects were like documentation. People from the region community were very split on bug script documentation, region React documentation, like all these kind of like different brands. Is this going to be different in Melange? Are we going to adopt more like a OCaml style of documentation? What's the kind of like the biggest project of kind of community or the marketing efforts here?
Yeah, that's I mean, that's a great question, and also one that I haven't thought too much about. But I guess I'll say what I have thought about and what I know today. So actually, like one of the things that Rescript did really well was their website. The Rescript documentation website is really, really good. It has a beautiful design, a unified brand, and like all the projects sort of under their umbrella are documented on the same place. One thing that we get for free by using Dune and publishing to OPAM is that the new OCaml.org website is really, really good. And they're just building a bunch of features on top of that. They're always building new stuff. Even today, they're like, I think this week they're trying with a new like search within the modules, right? Within the modules in a package.
Mm-hmm.
So like one thing that I'm expecting we get for free is like all the ODoc and the publishing integration, like the OCaml.org scraping. Like when we release Reason React to OPAM, right? Then we'll be able to just get a page in OCaml.org with the Reason React API documentation. However, I think that's not enough. I think that some projects are going to be so core to the Melange experience that we'll have to document them alongside the main documentation. And I believe Reason React is one of those.
Right.
Right. So
that makes sense.
If you're using if you're using Melange, and especially if you're using Reason syntax, which has support for JSX, right? Reason React is a killer library. It's a really, really good like way of writing React.js in Melange.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
We really want to highlight that, right? Like if that's such a core part of the ecosystem, and it's a new ecosystem that we're bootstrapping, we want to include all the libraries that are sort of core to that in the website. Reason React was one of those, and like we'll probably think of some others. But my hope is that there will be both a place where all the libraries can get documented automatically just by publishing to OPAM, because we get a lot of that for free, and then also like a place with curated information for not just the Melange core, but like, hey, this is actually the set of libraries that you might find yourself reaching for if you're doing Melange. And the first one that I personally bring in is Reason React. So
Right.
as
Yeah,
people
that
get
makes complete
experience and
sense.
as people are using these libraries, we should definitely, like, if those are sort of like recommendations, or I struggle a bit with recommendations, because like, but rather like, if it's what people end up using organically, then we should probably document it alongside.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So at the beginning of the show, I think Ulrich asked, "What do you think about the React server kind of like paradigm shift, and would ever be the same fantasy in OCaml?"
Yeah,
I think the
React. I
question,
guess you're talking about React Server components. Is that
yeah,
okay? Your thoughts on the new client server stuff in React? Um, okay, to answer the second question, if we can get that into Melange, the answer is a resounding yes, and I have an application where that already works. Really, the only thing that you needed was a way to issue at least in Next.js, right? The use client directive specifically. And then my thoughts on, I guess, to the first question, my thoughts on React Server components are a little bit conflicted, because I think we're I think we're onto something, or I think the React community is onto something, but I also believe that we're so early that it's very hard to see the light. Like, it's very hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I feel like React Server components are a really interesting paradigm. It's effectively an RPC protocol between your, like, right, that React manages for you. And then if you're bought into the React model, then you can do a lot of things within React, and just within React. It's almost like a different, like, I like language, and I'll risk saying this, but because I know, like, one of the core tenets of React forever has been, hey, this is just JavaScript, as opposed to like some templating language that you then augment with, right, some dynamism. However, there are arguments to be made that React has not actually been JavaScript from the beginning, because yes, you can. It's really easy to write your React components in a JS file, but then, like, if we stop to think about, I guess, JSX is like, all right, it's a purely syntactical transformation, but if we squint, yeah, it's still JavaScript. And then hooks came along, right? And yes, hooks are not even a syntactical transformation, but they're like, as we see by the dependency array, for example, right? Like, it's a very hard concept to express in a language like JavaScript without proper constructs for, I guess, continuations, or like first class continuations, I think.
right.
And so I think we're seeing the same thing, is like, and I'd say React Server components is even like straying from that a little bit more. Is like, all right, now we're not even, now we're not even JavaScript, right? We're an RPC protocol. We're a network protocol. I mean, I personally don't see anything wrong with that. I think it's one evolution of something dictated by, not like influenced by production workloads and production use cases, right? So I think it's iterative, it's incremental improvement towards something that I believe the end state is gonna be really interesting. I just feel like we can't see what it looks like right now yet. However, I'll say one thing specifically on like the Next.js thing, and I guess the use client directive. That one confuses people a little bit, and I don't know if they're going to keep, if eventually the design is going to change, if use client is what we're stuck using forever. But I feel like I haven't yet seen any good explanation for like someone who stares at a React file that has a use client directive at the top, or like when to import something onto something. That part gets really confusing, and I feel like people need like a good, like, we need to, I don't know, we need to find a good analogy, right? Some people understood monads by telling them that it's a burrito, right? Some, like, we need the
Right.
burrito for React Server components effectively. We need something
Okay.
that we need a good analogy for we need a good analogy for expressing that the use client directive is really about what ends up in which JavaScript bundle, rather than like what happens at runtime. Or it's not really, it's not related to importing at all. It's not related to using anything at all. It is just
Right.
related to like, I want this component to never be part of, like, to never be sent to my client bundle.
Right.
That's all it is. And so I guess the issue I have with it is that I haven't yet seen like a good explanation of that. And so
Right.
yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Good rambling. Good rambling. That was a good opinion.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe.
Cool. So like you talk about like React thinking like being a language on top of JavaScript, or missing the primitives of talking to language. And
I
I
guess
think
I guess what I wanted to say really is I think like that React would be like we would be able to express React in a lot, like in a lot like fewer lines of code if there were proper language primitives for it. Yes. Yeah.
right,
I guess
that makes
that's
sense.
what
That
I'm
makes
trying to say.
sense. And I'm just like connecting with another language primitive. So, and a few people asked for it, and I think I'm really interested as well. Is OCaml multicore. So multicore makes a lot of sense on backend, makes not so much sense on the front end. But when Melange is going to be ready for 5.0 or 5.1?
Yeah. I guess there are a few things to highlight there. Number one, which is probably the easiest to get out of the way, is Melange can actually already compile on OCaml 5. So it's actually like a nice improvement that we made a few weeks ago. Is Melange can actually compile from, I think, OCaml 4.13 to OCaml 5.1, which hasn't been released yet. It just means that it's installable and it can compile your code. So if you have native server code that you're using OCaml 5.4, you can you don't need to switch, like you don't need a different OPAM switch to compile that code.
Right.
So that already works. But then, like, the real thing that you're talking about is like, when is Melange going to be upgraded to the 5.0 like type checker runtime standard library? And the thing that we get from that is, I guess we'd get a domain module, and we get an algebraic effects module. The domain module in itself is not useful at all, because JavaScript is a single-threaded language, and OCaml domains allow you to express shared memory parallelism. It would still be helpful to have that domain in the standard library, because then you potentially become more compatible with code that gets published to OPAM that's using the domain module, right? Even if you're just shimming it, and hopefully provide some other ways for your code to run concurrently. So that is I guess runtime stdlib and domains. Then the interesting part really is algebraic effects, right? We've seen that JS of OCaml has been able to support algebraic effects. However, the approach that they take is effectively like adding a continuation argument to every function call, and that is something that I think like that is a little bit of like too much of a trade-off to do in Melange. So we're trying to explore other alternatives of like how we would be able to compile algebraic effects into JavaScript. There have been a few attempts. I know that I think there's like some effort. I've heard of some efforts by the Chromium team, for example, that provide a library for I think one-shot continuations that we need to explore. I know that we've explored JavaScript generators, if you remember those, right? The yield keyword and the function star. We've explored that a little bit. So, but it's still unclear on how we're going to be compiling algebraic effects to JavaScript,
Right.
because we need a set of like we need to work within the set of constraints of like the Melange support, and those can be a bit harder to support than, for example, JavaScript or OCaml, because we have a really strong like foreign function interface, like calling convention as well, that like Melange functions, for example, are callable from JavaScript, right?
Right.
And if we now introduce a new argument at the end, or if we introduce a new like a function that can work with that that new, like, let's call it ABI, then we lose that property, which is very important to us.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So if what's next? Like, I think that's a mandatory question I need to ask. Like, what's next for Melange?
Yeah,
What are the features that you didn't you cut for V1 and you wish to have for next
yeah,
versions?
exactly. Yeah. We cut Melange v1. What's next, right? Are we done? Do we just stop working on it?
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. I think the plan is to. I'd say it's at least threefold. So number one is Melange is OCaml and should, in my mind, keep growing with the OCaml community, right? So as OCaml gets new versions, as OCaml gets new support, new features, we're going to try as much as possible to support those in Melange as well and document the differences. The other one, like that's a big one, is like ecosystem compatibility, ecosystem integration. The second pillar that we need to move forward on is community and ecosystem. You have been working on this, right? You have been providing great help, but we need more people writing libraries. We need more people publishing libraries. We need more people trying out the documentation, trying out Melange, seeing if they like it, providing feedback, and incorporating a lot of that feedback. So we need to, I think, generate more discussion. We need to bring more people to try it. Effectively, we need more Melange customers, I guess. We need more libraries.
Right.
We need more ecosystem. And then the third thing is developer experience. There are a few. For example, can you guess what the most upvoted issue in Buckle script ever has been? You probably know the answer to this.
I think it's like, I think you're messing up. It's the Dune repository. The biggest start issue is backscript support.
No,
I think it's the other way around.
that's not what I'm asking. No.
No, it's source maps.
That's right. Yes,
I knew it.
You knew it. There you go. Yeah, exactly. So the most upvoted issue in the Buckle script repository that has never been fixed is source maps. For people who are not familiar with it, source maps provide a way to map your generated code back to your source files. So this is very useful. For example, when unfortunately, we're still human, and we still write bugs, and we still write runtime errors. There are websites like Sentry or Bugsnag or I don't know, Rollbar, sites like that that allow you to track JavaScript errors at runtime. So what that effectively does is, if your application is running in the browser and you throw an error, right, an unexpected error, there are these platforms that will sort of upload the stack trace for you and notify you on Slack or Discord or like Microsoft Teams or whatever have you. And so that is generally, or when we were all writing just plain JavaScript, we didn't need any tooling like source maps, because we could just look at the stack trace, go to JavaScript file, find the line where through the exception, and hopefully we would know how to fix it. That's sort of the hard part, maybe. And then now that we're all just compiling to JavaScript, right, and from all these languages, source maps provide a way to effectively map what the generated line of code is in the original like source code that we wrote. So this is something that we want to support because we found that it's really interesting. It's really helpful to be able to for the software engineers on your team to be able to look at a production error and being able to instantly map it to the line of code that generated it in the OCaml or the reason source file.
Right.
So this is a big one, right? This is a big one in developer experience, for example, that we're looking at. So I have a branch for source map somewhere. Eduardo actually helped me early on, like how to like prove it out and like how to make it work in Melange. And we like it. So we've effectively learned what all the unknowns that we didn't know were, and so now the path is a lot clearer towards implementing source maps. So we have a branch that works with simple expressions. And so it's mostly just a matter of now going and like flowing all the like source locations through the compiler backend until the code generation part, so that we can accrue like what the generated lines versus the original lines are, and then putting a configuration on it, integrating with Dune, choosing how to when to emit source maps, when to embed the source code in those source maps as well, because most likely if you're writing a production application, you don't want to embed like your entire source code within the source maps, because then your source code is effectively visible for your customers. So some of like those wrinkles need to be figured out, but like I'm excited about that one specifically, and I think it's one that we can do within let's say at least until the end of the year.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, that's a good feature. What are all the features that BuckScript team back in the days kind of like discarded? I remember the discussion with Pipe First and Pipe Last. Are we getting those discussions back, or are we just laning up into Data Last? What are those topics that have been very painful in the past? How are those revisited now?
I mean, for the most part, they have not been revisited, I think.
Right.
I mean, I'm not looking forward to a pipe first versus pipe last discussion.
Right.
I think it would be a good thing if those discussions organically like happened, though. It would just mean that Melange was going to be more used, and people would have opinions on how to write their code. So yeah, I mean, I never really understood the pipe first, pipe last discussion myself.
Okay.
But now we have both, and we have some APIs written with pipe first and some APIs written with pipe last. To be honest, I think that's the worst of both worlds. So I think it would be good to unify around an idiom that is common an idiomatic in the OCaml community. That's probably pipe last. But I can see how pipe first can and has been useful historically. I think my real answer is we wait and see, and if we have enough people that are interested in Melange, that it's a good thing that happens, I guess.
Right. That makes sense. So you mentioned that you needed more customers for Melange. How people can get involved?
Yeah.
What places should go? What topics should they push for?
And I guess for the record, like, we don't need paying customers for Melange. We need people to try it
Definitely.
out and provide feedback. I guess one thing that we mentioned briefly in passing, but not really in detail, is that we're very much hard at work right now on the documentation website. So one thing that we want to do is when we release Melange V1, or maybe just shortly after, we want to also showcase that, hey, this we just released something, and then here's how you use it. Because if it's not documented, it doesn't exist. So I know, like, Javi specifically has been doing a really big push on documentation, and so I'm excited for people to see and provide feedback on like as they go through the docs. Like we've definitely mostly been writing the docs as reference, sort of like a reference documentation. I really want to focus on writing a few tutorials and guides here and there because I think they'll prove very useful as people start using Melange. As for the practical aspects, hopefully when Melange is released, like when the next version of Melange and Dune are released, then you'll just be able to run OCaml install Melange if you're an OCaml user, and then consult the documentation either in the Dune docs or the Melange docs for, hey, how do you write the first like incantations for making Dune build your project, and sort of go from there.
Yeah.
The really beautiful thing is that if you have Melange v1 and you can OCaml install Melange, well, I guess number one, if you were familiar with the OCaml ecosystem tooling, then you'll be productive right away. But if you're not familiar with the OCaml ecosystem tooling, good news is for Melange, there's only going to be one tool and one command. Right? Is like you're gonna need Dune and you're just gonna need Dune build, and that will build everything. Right? It will run your pre-processing. It will run. It will output JavaScript into a target directory in a build folder. It can even promote that output folder with all your JavaScript back to your source tree. So you can see all the generated JavaScript files and the assets that you're dependent on next to them. So I'm really excited. I think you've been able to provide, and we're working towards a more unified experience. So I'm excited to see what people build with it.
Right. That's kind of like the
So yeah, sorry. You had asked like where people can reach out and contact us.
Yeah.
There are multiple places where you can do that. If you think you found an issue, you can open an issue in the Melange. I'm sure Dave will add all the links in the video description later when he uploads this. I'll pester him to do that. But you can find you can go to the Melange repository and GitHub open issues. You can find us on the ReasonML Discord in the Melange channel. You can also just always DM me either on Discord or Twitter or wherever you find me. You can also find my email. It's available pretty publicly online. You can also just email me.
Nice. So can we say that the kind of reason, kind of drive is back? Not the reason itself. Maybe that's a big announcement. But can we say the vision is back?
Yeah, I mean, I would maybe be careful about saying that ReasonML is back,
right?
Especially because ReasonML was perceived differently from different people at different times. I think we want to emphasize that ReasonML is just a syntax.
Right. Yeah.
What really is back is I think what people really liked, and I don't know if people necessarily liked ReasonML. I don't know if people. Or even after you are bought into the ecosystem, or because you started down this road because you liked how ReasonML looked like, it looked fairly familiar to you. I think what really made people stay was the impressive work of engineering that the BuckleScript compiler is, and so I think that is back. Right. I think Bob did an amazing job initially, developing BuckleScript. And we're just taking it and running with it, right? We're adapting the workflows that people liked, which was effectively bridging to the Node.js, the JavaScript, the NPM ecosystem. We're taking that and we're sort of putting our own take on it and saying, hey, we're actually the OCaml ecosystem, but here's a really nice way that you can go and consume your NPM dependencies as well. And here's a really nice way that you can also produce your JavaScript files in a way that are amenable for those modern JavaScript tools to take them and treat them as if you had just written handwritten JavaScript. Because I think that's really important today, for especially as frameworks get more and more opinionated. I think Remix, for example, they want you to. I think one of the ways is like you need like a .server.js file or a .client.js file. At least initially that it was. I haven't looked at it in a long time. I know that like Next.js, for example, needs you to put your files in an app directory, and you need to have like a different. You need to have app. I guess let's use ML, right? App.ml, layout.ml, and something else. So they have like these different files in the folders that mean different things, and so our goal is to also work within that ecosystem and be able to produce a file structure that can be consumed by modern JavaScript frameworks. And so like we've preserved all of that. Like all of that still works. We designed the Dune configuration, and we designed the Dune integration for Melange explicitly with those workflows in mind, with the ability to consume JavaScript files or assets that are next to you. We call them runtime deps. With the ability to output files in a file system structure that is amenable to be consumed by these modern JavaScript frameworks. So I'm really excited of like what we've been able to accomplish, and I think we're ready to provide these modern workflows. Like, I guess ultimately, like we're learning from all the accumulated experience that like from the OCaml community, and then we're also bridging with all the accumulated experience from the JavaScript community and being able to use our favorite language to produce like all these modern workflows in the way that people write JavaScript today and deploy it. So I don't know. I think it's definitely some frontier, and I'm excited for what's next.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Even though, need to say that there's some activity in the Reason repo, but that's for another day.
That's maybe for another day, but like I guess yes. What should we say about that? Like, yes, you can still like ReasonML, the syntax is alive and kicking. It has it has been updated for all the newer OCaml versions, including OCaml 5.1, which hasn't even been released yet. So Reason exists, and it is there if you want to use it. It has never actually gone away. If you like Reason syntax, you can write Reason syntax, be it for compiling to JavaScript through Melange, or you could even use Reason syntax in your native OCaml code. Dune has support for it. As an example, right? Like up until December, I was working on Netlify, working on Netlify Graph, and all our native, like we were writing ReasonML, right? All our native code was ReasonML compiled with Dune into an ELF binary that we deployed, right? So yeah, Reason's being maintained.
Yep, that is true. Cool. So what's the project that excites you the most with Melange? I mean, you mentioned that cross boundaries and making sure the testing goes end to end, or typing goes end to end. What are the kind of project that you would do if you would not spend time building Melange?
So if I weren't working on Melange, what would I be working
exactly.
on?
If you would not work with Ahrefs and with other companies, what project would you be building with Melange?
I see. Yeah. I guess there are multiple answers to that question.
Ooh.
Because I don't know. I like a lot of things. Let's put it that way.
Right.
One thing that I want to build. So, I guess my other life, other than Melange, in a sense, is sort of like I really like networking, and I really like networking protocols and like the web stack, and sort of over time I've been able to sort of adapt and build my own libraries for like a web stack, such as so I guess I forked HTTPAF a few years ago, which is an HTTP1 library in OCaml, and like I added a bunch of features to it, including like connection upgrades that it didn't support and some other stuff. I built like an HTTP2 library in OCaml that is actually I think used. I think it's yeah it's getting like some usage in the OCaml community, and then I guess Dream, right? Dream is using both of those like both of those libraries, one that I created, um, to to deliver like a good like web stack, a good like web development experience for OCaml folk. So I guess if I weren't working on Melange, one thing that I'm interested in is like advancing that ecosystem of libraries as well. Right, I have like maybe a 40 to 60% implementation of OCaml Quick, the Quick protocol and HTTP3, that I'd love to like work on and deliver. I have like a WebSocket library that needs a lot of love, for example. So like I guess I'd love to be working on like that networking stuff. Maybe write a reverse proxy, something along those lines. But otherwise, I'm also interested in eventually starting a company and in like the developer tooling space and seeing how far I can run with that. So I'm looking at a few ideas and like I'd love to build a platform for other developers to come and build uh, build their applications or build integrations on them. So I'm toying with a few ideas right now, but like nothing concrete.
Right. Right. That makes sense. And aside from Melange, would Twitch see you more often? I think you appear once
Oh
every
yeah, yeah.
year or twice every year.
My annual
Yeah, your
stream,
yearly stream,
my
exactly.
annual stream on
Uh,
Twitch.
would people
Um,
see more like those work in the public,
yeah, I mean,
or the Antonio streamer is not there?
I actually do like streaming quite a bit. I find that it keeps me on task. Right, if I have say a well defined task and I need to work on it, then streaming is actually really good, to like to focus, to provide like a good environment for uh, like-minded people to come in and chat and then work together on a problem. I just feel like I'm very very inconsistent with it, and it sometimes when I like I have like I'm doing odd hours or like I'm working on a more open-ended problem where I don't want to be interacting with chat. Right, I just like need to really like procrastinate a lot or focus or go for a walk to sort of like clear my head and see if an idea pops in and those at those times like streaming is actually not that helpful. um,
Right.
yeah.
Right. That makes sense. And I think we're getting to the last questions. And now it seems like in Twitter, OCaml is trending.
Okay.
Those are not my words; those are not my statements. But it seems that the influencer kind of like streamers, they do talk now about OCaml, even before just before Eduardo was speaking on OCaml, no one else was in OCaml. But now seems that TJ, even the Remagen, like the big names on software in post podcasts, they are interested in OCaml. Why do you think is that? And
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it was pretty. I was pretty pleased when I think I stumbled upon TJ's stream last December, and he was doing Advent of Code in OCaml. Definitely
right,
had like a lot of fun back then, like helping one or two problems. And I guess TJ specifically, who I talked to quite a bit, has been, really like diving into OCaml, and I guess he's a really good communicator, and he gets people engaged in his tweets when he publishes them as well. I think it has been really interesting seeing the conversation grow on Twitter about OCaml. But I have yet to see if we're going to get new users from it. Right, I'm very 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 excited about like those folks getting exposed to it and trying it out and seeing, and finding out how pragmatic the OCaml language is. So I definitely think that OCaml has a lot to offer, and I want people. I exposure really cannot hurt, right? So it's
Right.
really awesome that conversation has been flowing, and I'm there for it, right? I I guess if if people are watching this that found the show from Twitter, or found OCaml from Twitter, um, please, if you're interested, I'm open. My DMs are open. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to help you get into language and answer any questions.
Nice, nice. And I think that's kind of the last question that I started in the last kind of beat is that uh, what needs to happen for a Melange conf?
For what?
For a Melange conf, a conference.
Oh, what needs to happen for a Melange
Yeah.
conference?
What are the kind of like the goals that need to I don't know, like number of users, number of companies, I
I
don't know,
mean,
like what needs to happen?
I guess there are two things that are required for a Melange conference to happen.
Right? Okay.
Number one is a budget, and number two is
Budget is not imagine the
attendees.
budget is not a problem.
Then we need
Imagine the
then we
budget,
need attendees.
right? Attendees,
In all seriousness, right? What we need for a
right?
Melange conference is an ecosystem. We need more people using it. We need more teams using Melange. We need more people to talk about it, and we need. So this is actually like, I think one of the things that I've been thinking about is one of the downsides of running an open source project like Melange is, as opposed to like say a company, is that you don't know who your users are. So
Right.
I know some of the like people that are using Melange, but I can bet that there are people using Melange that I don't know about.
Yeah.
Right. And the ecosystem is too small right now. We are definitely underdogs, and we need to prove ourselves to the wider ecosystem, right? We need to develop workflows. We need to develop tutorials, guides. We need to write out a lot of write down like a lot of libraries. So I think like this is a really interesting point, Dave, and community is a really, really, really big part of it. I know you are like especially like excited and skilled in building like building communities and getting people to talk about stuff. So like all I can ask for is for people to use Melange, for people to be excited about it and spread the word. Like I certainly am excited about Melange, and I'm committed to working on this ecosystem for the long run. So, come on over, try it out, message me, tell me what you think. I'd love to get you started on Melange, and I especially would like to hear all your feedback about Melange, because I think we can grow it to be the de facto way people compile to JavaScript in OCaml, and I think right, it's just so ahead of the curve in terms of the workflows that it provides, in my opinion.
Yep, there's no better way to end this interview, I think. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time, Antonio. I think that has been a pleasure, both being part of the process of Melange, and to be part of kind of my excitement. I share as well excitement. I think I spend a lot of time with Melange and this like never-ending pinning the versions that you and Javi were publishing. So, and I think those days are very soon to be over. And yeah, many things are coming from you and obviously the Ahrefs team. And thanks for being here and all the work that you have been doing.
No, this was amazing. Thank you for being, I think, user number 0 of Melange. Right? I think that's what you. I think you were one of the first users.
I think yeah.
Right, like you were definitely one of the first users, and you've just been so excited about it. Like seeing your excitement just really brings me energy as well to keep working on it. I think this was amazing. Thanks for putting this together. Thanks for reaching out to the community at large. Right, I think a lot of people are going to watch this and be more informed. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you everybody. See you.